This video is for rational, skeptical, analytical thinkers like me. And particularly if you are curious about Buddhism, or if you are curious about whether there might be some religion or some spiritual system out there that might actually be right for you. And if you're like me, you might have been burned before. I was raised Catholic. I turned very strong atheist at about age 13, and I remained that way for um, maybe 15, 20 years. So, um, yeah, I understand if you are super against religion, organized religion of all kinds. That was me for a very long time. And if you struggle with depression or nihilism or finding meaning and purpose, then I believe I've come to find in all my searching that finding your home in a spiritual system that resonates can really make a profound impact on your life. And so, if you're like me, I know that you're not going to be able to buy into something unless it makes sense, unless it feels rational, right? And so, in this video today, I want to try to, I won't say convince you, but I want to offer my perspective on Buddhism through the lens of a fellow, skeptical analytical thinker. And in particular, I want to challenge myself to see if in just 15 minutes or so, I can actually kind of derive Buddhism from rationality. So we'll see how this goes. I want to see if, I can kind of use almost the Socratic method on myself to ask questions that will lead to the truths of Buddhism just being self-evident. So I say this because unlike most other mainstream religions that rely on faith, Buddhism is, especially Zen Buddhism, which is the lineage that I practice, that I enjoy. It really is a highly rational, logical system. So, you might say that some degree of faith is required in some ways, but it's really kind of a faith built on experience. Like once you have meditated a lot and you start to see, glimpses, peaks of interesting phenomena, then that kind of gives you faith to start to potentially believe other things. But it's not just a faith from you read it in a book, it's a faith from you actually experienced it yourself. And so in this video, there's going to be nothing about God, nothing about, converting people, or rather, I should say, Buddhism does not contain anything about God or about a need to convert people or proselytize. It doesn't give you a set of rules that you must follow. Like you're not getting into Buddhist heaven unless you do these things. There's no conception of that. So I hope that just knowing those as kind of the ground rules, that it might seem a little more palatable to you already. In this video, I'm not even going to talk about reincarnation. That might be kind of a famous thing that you've heard that Buddhism talks about. But to be honest, in Zen, we really don't talk about reincarnation very much. We don't even talk about karma really that often. And so, those are kind of loaded terms. And so I want to not focus on reincarnation and karma because honestly they're not that important in Zen. It's really more about focus on this lifetime, focus on right now, and sure, other things might happen after you die, who knows, right? We can't prove it. So it's definitely not about like live this life well so that you can accumulate good karma and be reincarnated in some better state in the future. That's not the focus at all. So let's take those off the table and let's start from scratch, and we'll see if I can help us find our way through kind of the major Buddhist teachings. So let's start at the beginning. Let's start with the same question that the historical Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, started with 2,500 years ago. So In Buddhism, there's no idea that the Buddha is God or anything like that. He's just a guy. He was this prince back in India, and he asked this question, what causes human suffering? Because he grew up in this lavish palace, and one day he kind of saw outside for the first time. He saw sickness for the first time. He saw death for the first time, and he was like, holy crap, wow, what is going on here? This is not okay. And he looked around and saw suffering all over. People suffer in all sorts of ways. So he was trying to figure out, how do we stop suffering? How do we not suffer as humans? This sucks, right? So, all right, so let's start with this kind of line of questioning. So if I were to ask you, what makes you suffer? You'd probably say, well, pain, right? Being in pain causes suffering. If I stub my toe, that hurts. I don't like it. If my friend dies, that hurts. I don't like it. It causes me to suffer. If I'm sick, I suffer, right? And, that seems to make sense, right? Pain causes suffering. But, it's really more about the framing, because some kinds of pain will cause you to suffer more or less depending on how you frame them, right? Like, if you, no one likes going to the dentist, right? And the tools that a dentist uses can seem pretty horrific, like these drills and like clamps and pincer things and everything, right? And so if you feel this kind of drilling on your mouth, and you know that it's part of a dental procedure, that the dentist is trying to help you, they're trying to fix your tooth, then you're probably going to hate it less than the exact same situation, except you've been captured and you're being tortured with that same drill, right? Like they might be drilling to the same place, but with the intent to hurt you. Like that kind of pain is going to feel a lot more horrific, right? And so that, I think that's just an example of how our minds are really good at, kind of taking the same stimulus and processing it differently depending on the circumstances. And so the true thing that causes suffering is not quite the pain. It's the framing. This is bad. I don't like this. I want it to stop. Right? Like if you could reach a state where you could just blissfully accept, like, this is pain and I'm okay with it. Like, I recognize this pain is good for some reason, or, it's okay for some reason, you're going to suffer less. Right? Even like when you get a shot, in my experience, if I'm like clenching super tight, like, oh, I don't like it, then that feels much worse than if I take a deep breath and I kind of breathe out as they put the shot in. That feels better. And so, the true cause of suffering is actually the clenching. It's the saying, I hate this, I want it to stop, go away, I don't like it. That's what causes suffering. And so, really, if we think about it at the most base level, the only cause of human suffering is, I don't want reality to be this way. I want reality to be different. I'm sick. I don't want to be sick anymore. My loved one died. I don't want them to be dead. Right? So the cause of suffering is aversion. I don't like this. I want it to change. And in particular, it's aversion to something that you can't actually control. You can't make the pain go away. You can't make your loved one come back to life. Right? So the cause of suffering is wanting something to be different that you can't control. That's it. And therefore, suffering can be reduced or even go away entirely if you change your attitude toward it. And yeah, that seems like a stupid, like trite self-help thing to say, right? Just change your attitude and everything's okay. So it's much easier said than done. And this right there that's the core principle that all of Buddhism is built on. And so there are many tools to help you do it. So what I've just covered is, in simple language, the Four Noble Truths. That is the foundation of Buddhism. It's basically life is full of challenges. Inherently, just by being alive, there are all sorts of crappy things that happen. These things cause you suffering if you want them to be different and you can't control them. If you're clinging to certain outcomes, to I don't like this, I wish it were different, that's going to cause you suffering. There is a way to stop the suffering. Don't worry, you're not locked into suffering forever. You can stop it. And the way to do that is Buddhism, is the techniques taught by the Buddha, basically in the different sutras and most prominently in what's called the Eightfold Path, which I'll get to in a moment. So the Four Noble Truths are the core teachings that it's said that they're the first things that the Buddha taught after he achieved enlightenment. And enlightenment isn't some mystical, magical thing. It's basically just awakening to deeper truth. That's all enlightenment is. And so once the Buddha came out of this really deep meditation, he realized, oh my God, yes, all of the answer to my question, what causes human suffering, it can be explained in these 4 points. That's it. All right. So far we have rationally covered the Four Noble Truths. Now let's move on. Okay, this video ended up going longer than I expected, so I'm going to split it here. We've covered the Four Noble Truths. Next time we will go into the Eightfold Path, deriving that rationally. That'll be part 2. And then there's going to be a part 3 as well, where we will go deeper still into some more esoteric parts of Buddhism. So I hope you'll stick with me for those 2 remaining parts.